What did you think of General Conference?
Does God have any real opinion about anything that's going to kill us all?
At times, yeah.
Okay. Eesh. We need to talk about this. Recently, an atheist named Jared Smith posted a video where he went after the Mormons for quite a few things. But the one that stood out to me was that he seems to want the church to be more political. Now, political commentary isn't bad per se, but the politics Jared and many others want in the church are terrible. In this video, I will examine his critiques and show the bad premises and data they are based on, but then stick around because I ultimately will agree we need more politics in the church. Just not the way Jared wants. Let's get started. If you don't know Jared Smith, he's a former evangelical turned atheist who goes around to different churches doing church audits. He tries to be fair and usually has a mixture of praise and critique of the churches he visits, including the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka the Mormon Church. And of course, as you might expect, his videos on Mormonism have tons of views. And overall, he's a cool dude. I actually met him at the Ruslan Bless God Summit a couple months ago, and even had lunch with him twice there. It was great, and I have no beef with him whatsoever. But in his last video, he was less positive towards our faith. He went to General Conference with a guy named Douglas Stilgo, aka Nemo the Mormon, aka Nemo the ex-Mormon. And one thing stood out to me that we have to talk about.
What did you think of General Conference?
I think it's a fast way to make an atheist to imagine that God has absolutely nothing relevant to say to so many people.
I'd be inclined to agree. What sort of things would you like to have heard?
What does God have to say about the nuclear arms race? What does God have to say about destroying the planet? What does God have to say about the loneliness epidemic? What does God have to say about artificial intelligence? Does God have any real opinion about anything that's going to kill us all?
At times, yeah.
Jared is factually wrong about church leaders not addressing these topics. It turns out one General Conference session isn't enough info to form an informed opinion on church leaders. Who knew? But we'll get to that later. First, we need to talk about what's wrong with this whole approach that Jared is taking. I'm sure that God has all sorts of opinions on the topics that Jared brought up. But if I could address Jared and others who make this kind of critique just for a moment, this would be my response. Respectfully, maybe God cares more about your soul than he does about the Pacific garbage patch. Maybe he's interested in helping you to love others and him more deeply than he is about helping you to know that other people shouldn't start nuclear Armageddon. Something so blindingly obvious that having to point it out would be an admission of incompetence on the part of LDS leadership, not a moral triumph. Maybe God is answering the loneliness epidemic by telling you to get married and have kids. Maybe he's addressing AI by teaching all of us how to receive personal revelation. Maybe it is your AI, nuclear weapon, and eco-doomerism that are out of touch with reality, not the LDS leadership. But if that's still not good enough for you, then the LDS brethren are in good company. Jesus Christ was also frustratingly apolitical and detached from what the Jews viewed as imminent and pressing issues. I'd argue Roman occupation was worse than global warming or dirty beaches, yet Jesus was not there to alleviate those problems, or at least that was not his primary goal. Instead, he told stories about a man helping somebody who was hurt, mustard seeds growing, and how the persecuted would be rewarded in the next life. The people wanted political salvation. Jesus brought personal salvation. Jared didn't come to Journal Conference hoping to get some insight into recycling. He came hoping that people with authority that he doesn't respect would tell other people to care about the things he cares about. And to be very clear, I don't want to come off as harsh on Jared. In fact, I want to avoid entertainment debunking on this channel. What I want to use this as is a case study that we can all use to examine our own approach to these topics. There's a spiritual danger in putting the worldly cart before the spiritual horse that C.S. Lewis actually explains brilliantly in the Screwtape Letters. As a side note, on this channel, I want to incorporate insights from men with far more wisdom than I possess. That's the idea behind the intro to my videos, for example, but I digress. The Screwtape Letters were written from the perspective of a devil named Screwtape, who is coaching his demon nephew Wormwood on how best to lure a young man away from God, who Screwtape calls the enemy. So here's what Lewis, writing his uncle Screwtape, observes. I find the best point of attack would be the borderline between theology and politics. Several of his new friends are very much alive to the social implications of their religion. That in itself is a bad thing, but good can be made out of it. Certainly we do not want men to allow their Christianity to flow over into their political life, for the establishment of anything like a really just society would be a major disaster. On the other hand, we do want, and want very much, to make men treat Christianity as a means, preferably of course as a means to their own advancement, but, failing that, as a means to anything. Even to social justice. The thing to do is to get a man at first to value social justice as a thing which the enemy, God, demands, and then work him into the stage at which he values Christianity because it may produce social justice. I think Lewis hits the nail on the head. Politics is good, as Screwtape says, but politics are downstream of religion. You have to start right to end right. So, Jared was wrong to complain about not seeing enough social and political issues in General Conference, but he was also just factually wrong. Church leaders have commented plenty on these issues. For example, here's just a couple. Last year, Apostle Garrett W. Gong gave a BYU devotional address on AI that included the warning that AI is not and cannot be God, and that church members will not grow spiritually if they outsource their gospel learning to AI. And just a few months ago, the church released an hour-long presentation titled Faith, Dignity, and Human Flourishing, Hearing God's Voice in an Age of Artificial Intelligence. Also, a few years ago, Apostle Gerald Cossé spoke on stewardship of the earth and said, beyond being simply a scientific or political necessity, the care of the earth and of our natural environment is a sacred responsibility, entrusted to us by God, which should fill us with a deep sense of duty and humility. It is also an integral component of our discipleship. How can we honor and love Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ without honoring and loving their creations? The church has undertaken large initiatives to be more conservation-minded in temple and meeting house grounds. And in 2020, Dallin H. Oakes reminded Latter-day Saints, quote, "And as citizens and members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we must do better to help root out racism." So the church leaders have talked plenty on these topics. So I know I was possibly harsh on Jared, but ultimately he's not exactly wrong. The gospel is not competing with the world's problems for our attention. The gospel is the answer to the world's problems. Spencer W. Kimball said as much when faced with a similar criticism to that levied by Jared. I saw the people in Peru where they have just now had an earthquake. I saw them suffer. And when we were upbraided by one of the press one day for not taking care of all these poor people, why did we travel the world and do all these things and did not care for these people, he asked. I said, that is something you don't understand. If these people would accept the gospel of Christ, the program is provided and they could be taken care of, and their sufferings could be alleviated. They could enjoy reasonable conditions in their homes and in their living. He goes on, and that is true, brothers and sisters. In my feeling, the gospel is the answer to all the problems of the world, if we go deeply enough and are all united in solving them. There it is. The gospel is the answer. LDS leaders don't need to opine on political topics every general conference in case there's an atheist in the audience who'll give them a bad review if they don't. They provide the doctrinal blueprint, and then we extrapolate it from there. On paper, it doesn't look like it should work, but it does. And I think Jared picked up on this paradox a little bit in the video without making that connection explicitly.
I am perpetually perplexed by the state of the Latter-day Saint world. On the one hand, I consistently meet wonderful, gracious, kind-hearted Latter-day Saints who are really thoughtful and really earnest. And candidly, I don't know where they're getting that from. Because here at General Conference, this is supposed to be the opportunity for the leadership, the prophets of God, to speak to their people. And seeing this whole thing in action, live and in person, it doesn't feel like you're a part of some big spiritual ordeal. It feels like you're a part of a business meeting.
Let's not get too confident, though. We do need to get out there and do the hard work of applying the principles of the gospel in everything, including politics. We need to engage more in preserving liberty, addressing the challenges unique to our modern era, and making informed choices at the ballot box. If any religious group should be engaging in politics, real politics, not just news addiction or partisan bickering, if any religious group should be engaged in that, it should be the Latter-day Saints. We bring a unique and, I would argue, correct theology and anthropology to the table, which are the two things absolutely necessary for successful political endeavors. If I had the time and wisdom and knowledge, this would merely be the intro to an extensive video on all these topics I've only mentioned in passing. Luckily, that is why this YouTube channel exists, to explore the intersection of religion, culture, and politics from a distinctly Latter-day Saint perspective. So if that's of interest to you, please subscribe, because I have many more weekly topics and some great guests lined up that I am very excited to share with you. I hope you'll all join me. But until then, thank you for watching.